So like you've been obviously tracking ARK, how much more do they have? Last I checked, was it 200 million or 200, is it 200 million that they
can still go. I mean, if they want to go in all three funds where they have Tesla 10%, currently some are at 5.5, some are 6.5, some are close to 9. So if all of them would go up back to 10%, they still have 260 million to buy. And they bought, I think it was about 120 now. So we're not even a third there. But they have been consistently dollar cost averaging. Obviously, we don't have today's numbers. It will be out in 2 hours. But you always have the feeling whenever the stock went down, they went back in, and they seem to have an algorithm. I mean, I'm probably overinterpreting, but I may as well share that. If the stock goes down, let's say 1%, they put in the equivalent of what they consider 1%. If the stock goes down 2%, they put in the double. If the stock goes down 3%, they put up the triple, right? So that's why you suddenly have days at 12 million, and then you have a day at 2 million, and then you have a day there's nothing happening because the stock went back up. So I have the feeling that's how their market maker, because those funds always have one market maker that executes the trades for them. The market maker is placing those. So but I mean, again, that's me speculating here, right? I mean, I could be completely off.
So now a question that somebody had presented to me was, how are they getting the funds to make all of this happen? Because they're not allowed to hold cash, right? So they have to
I love it. Thank you.
They've got to have inflows or outflows. And
no, there's actually a couple of things happening.
Yes,
I love it. Can I really talk about that? Because usually nobody wants to talk about that. Thank you. So ARK is different from all the other 5 I'm following because ARK has 0 cash. She just doesn't want to have any cash. Okay. So when you buy, you need to sell first. Yep. So whenever she presents in her daily trades, you can see that she sold for a total of 0.4%, and she bought something else for those 0.4%. So sometimes there are a couple of days where it's a little bit moving average, right? But they have to sell something. They have to get out of a position to get more into another position. That's ARK. And I'm coming to in and outflows in a second, because that's then a second movement that happens on top of it. For the other funds, they do have cash. Some of them even big. For example, VCAR, the one that has heavy options, they have quite a lot of cash because they want to have cash to purchase options when they're ready, right? So they have an 85 different stock portfolio in little bitsies and bitsies that probably reflects, I don't know, the Russell 1000 or whatever. It looks very, I mean, they have Moody's in there. I keep on screaming at Ted Park, how in the world can you hold Moody's, right? But that's just it. So they must have selected a certain beta mover basket, whatever, how they wanted it, the Apples and the Sonders and the Microsofts of this world, and then some medium caps. They add on that the options, but they keep a high equivalent of cash to be able to purchase other options, either because they now suddenly do straddles or whatever, or because they're now getting out of options and they have cash again, but they don't want to put it in equity. So that's the solar opposite from the ARK funds. The ARKs is all in stock, and you have to sell position from one stock to get into another stock. They are more, well, we have this 85 stock portfolio, but we have cash, and we use that cash to go aggressively into options for a couple of days and then out again and blah, 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 like these. And in the middle, you have the Gerber Kawasaki, the GK fund, and the new PP fund from Real Meet Kevin, or Meet Real Kevin, or I don't know what's his name, and Gary, and the YAL, the right wing fund. They do it more in a conservative manner, meaning they have a portfolio, and then sometimes they have $10,000 lying around. Sometimes they have $100,000 lying around. So this is a cash position they can build up when they have a conviction that it's too early to get into the market, but they want to get ready for it, and then they do it. So they have cash positions, but not to go into options like the VCAR, but whatever. So for all of them, the cash position has a different function. And then on top of it comes in and outflows. So the one thing that people don't understand with ETFs, and I'm sure you understand, but I want to say it again, is let's take ARK-K, for example. ARK-K has about 180 million shares outstanding. Let's say I'm a big institution and tomorrow I sell 10 million. Then tomorrow this ETF is only 170 million again. Meaning when I sell and nobody else buys the same days, these 10 million stock retire. So it's not like with Tesla where you need a buyer and a seller because you have a certain amount of stock. for the ETFs, the stock is the variable. The stock is the one adapting to in and outflows. When I come the next day and buy again 10 million, they issue new shares. I mean, obviously, there's nothing physically touchable, but that's how it works. So ETF, people don't follow that notion, but a very important notion to follow is how much stock is outstanding. What is the number of shares outstanding? Because it's not a fixed amount. It is something that belongs to in and outflows. So the ARKs of this world, and I'm sure even Gary of this world, they don't even look at in and outflows. It's the market maker that gets the information that today 5,000 ETF shares have been sold, and then proportionally all the 30 or 85 positions get cut a little bit to provide the liquidity to pay these, and then they retire, right? So it's much more physical than intellectual, right? It's really a matter of how many shares do I have? How much are they worth? Somebody goes out, I need to sell proportionally a little bit of each stock that's in there.
Okay. All right. So instead of having, actual piles of cash, they just basically utilize the shares of their ETF to generate that cash to make the moves.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. So, and now my impression, I thought, and I don't know if it's different for each fund, I was under the impression that they weren't even allowed to hold cash. So I thought that was a rule that they weren't allowed to.
They do. ARK clearly says they don't want to.
Yeah.
So ARK has some internal rules. The cash one, I don't think, is in the portfolio in the prospectus either. So ARK has two rules. I may be wrong on the second one, but I think it's the same. Saying none of our stocks can go above 10%, except if they move by the price above 10%. Meaning we can add to that stock until we get to the 10% limit. We can let it run then a bit. They hardly let it run more than 13, 14%. I think at one point in time in 2019, they had 16% of Tesla, but it was not because they added additional stock to it. They just let the price run, and the price ate into the portfolio, right? So the first rule is the 10%, which I think is the most stupid rule I've ever seen. And the second rule is that they don't want to have cash, right? They go out. Now, why do they do that? Over the last 2 years, where ARK's performance was horrific, mainly due to the Fed, but also because of stock picking that was extremely aggressive, because ARK is going into the niche of the IPO'd, but still high growth funds, right? Yeah. I mean, Tesla is in there as a mega cap, but Tesla is the only mega cap they're holding. All the rest is really high risk, just growing into it.
And when they first got into Tesla, it wasn't a mega cap.
The same, exactly. And Coin and I mean, they really took some big risk. I mean, obviously, Square is now getting there as well, whatever. But the initial approach is we analyze these companies very early and then we go into them. Yeah. And when they pitch it to institutionals, I don't think they do it as much to the retail people that I wish they would, but when they pitch it to institutionals, which now, and I think we want to talk about that, make up 50% of ARK, which is the biggest one, they obviously tell these institutionals, and I've heard Kathy Wood present this on CNBC and other channels, saying, look, you don't need 10% of an ARK fund, but you need 1 to 5% of an ARK fund. You portfolio manager, when you do your allocation, you may manage some of the stuff yourself. You may use other funds, index funds, whatever, for a certain purpose. But for the salt in the soup, add some ARK, because that is going to maybe produce nothing, but maybe be the high flyer of your life, right? And that's how they sell it to them. So that portfolio manager doesn't need her to hold cash. That would actually dilute his investment if ever this works, right? So her promise is that if her thesis is right, they will have the maximum exposure to that thesis and don't need cash to dilute it.
Okay. And I've got, throw this up here just because a question. With all due respect, ARK cannot hold cash because of the rules. They do not pay taxes when they sell something. This is why they need to buy something else immediately with the funds. Is that true to your knowledge?
It's not, because I think they have the same basis prospectus than the other ones, which are holding funds. the ETFs, I think there are two things that are mixed up here. The ETFs have a tax advantage role, right? They don't have the same rules that we retail investors have, that when we sell a stock, this creates a taxable event. Doesn't in an ETF. That's one of the big advantages of ETFs. But that doesn't mean none of them can hold cash, because like I said, all the others I look at on a daily basis have cash, and they have the same legislation under it. It could be that ARK in their portfolio put in the prospectus that they don't want to hold cash. Like I said earlier, I'm not 100% on it whether it's on the portfolio, but it is for sure one of their internal rules. No cash, no stock over 10%, except if the price moves it above 10%.
And now they can change their internal rules, right? So if they wanted to change it to 15%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been on them from 2 years ago. I started writing long threads about they should change it. I mean, no, nothing's going to happen. But I mean, it also will become less and less likely that they change anything, because now they have so much institutional investors. So let me go back to my 180 million shares of ARK. So over the last 2 years, these 180 million shares hardly budged. Remember, I told you that, if lots of people would sell, the number of shares would go down, because that's how they function, right? It's a method. The number of shares is a really important measure for ETFs. But the 180 million, they went down minus 20 plus 20, meaning they varied. They could have gone down to 160 and they went up to 210 or 206, but they didn't fall down with the performance, right? So meaning whenever retail investor exited because they couldn't stomach it anymore, obviously somebody else entered. And that's how we got to that tweet that we discussed together 2 or 3 days ago with those green lines, remember? Where we are today in a situation that ARK, of the 180 million shares outstanding, 90 million are in the hand of, I think it's 380 different institutionals. Okay. Meaning really, the Goldman Sachses of this world and whatever. And so once you make to these people the promise that your portfolio will have no stock going above 10%, except if the price rises, or that you don't hold cash, well, then you have to stick to that mantra, because that's why these people came in. With a retail investor, you could change it much easier, because retail investors are less sensitive to rule changes.